Number 1.
Unofficial Taxi Service by Second Coming of Yeezus. A few years ago, my mother and I had an encounter with a rather unusual taxi driver. I stayed involved in the Girl Scouts until the very last year, since most girls quit the Scouts after elementary or middle school. Our senior troop was very small, about 6 girls. We had worked hard all year fundraising, and one of the moms was a travel agent, so she hooked us up with a deal on a cruise for all the girls and the moms. We visited a couple of the US Virgin Islands. This story takes place on St. Martin. My mom and I had gone off to explore on foot, and had a great time. Secluded trails, a butterfly sanctuary, and we had a good laugh when we stumbled across a nude beach. It was getting time to head back. There were a bunch of taxis near the entrance to the beach. Not the traditional yellow taxis, mostly personal vehicles with signs on them indicating that they were taxis. One driver noticed us looking around and hollered, "Hey, looking for a ride?" Nothing suspicious about him at first glance. He was a tall, thin, dark-skinned fellow with an impressive set of dreadlocks and a wide, toothy smile. We told him we were heading to the dock and hopped into his car. The ride went pretty smoothly, but the guy took the long way back. He drove along all sorts of back roads, telling us how much he loved living on this island. Almost every little home or shack we drove by, he will point and exclaim, "My friend, blank, lives here," and telling us something about them. He chatted the whole way, but it was all happy, friendly chatter. And I certainly didn't mind getting another look at the beautiful landscape. After a while though, my mom nudged me and gave me an odd look. That's when I realized we'd been driving like 15 minutes or so. The dock wasn't that far, maybe a 5-minute drive maximum. This guy was obviously driving in circles. "Are we getting close?" my mom asked. "We have to be back on the ship at such and such time, or they'll leave without us." "No problem," the driver answered cheerfully. "I just like to take the scenic view. These cruise people don't let you look around. You miss the best parts of the island." He went back to telling stories, as though he was oblivious to our growing discomfort. Oh, fantastic, I thought. We'd been tricked into a fake taxi, and now it's taking us to God knows where. Was he a serial killer? Human trafficker? Just a random lunatic? As I was quickly panicking, the driver stopped abruptly on the side of the road. I looked across my mom and out her window. I could see the ship. We were blocks away from the dock. He had actually taken us where we were supposed to go. We scrambled out of the car, and the driver climbed out as well. "How much do we owe you?" my mom asked. "Oh, don't worry about it. No money," said the driver. "Maybe I could have a hug?" He then stretched his long, skinny arms out wide. Okay. My mom and I gave him an awkward side hug, one on each side. He laughed heartedly and said, "You lovely ladies have a nice day." Then he got back into his taxi and left. To this day, we can't figure out what the guy's deal was. He didn't try to hurt us, and even though charging a hug for a taxi ride is pretty weird, but it didn't come off as a lewd or sexual request at all. He took us on a joyride and told stories. He couldn't have been a real taxi driver because A, he didn't charge us money, and B, he parked a block away from the docks, making me think he didn't want anyone to catch him doing this. Maybe he was just some weird lonely guy who wanted someone to hang out with. Maybe he fancied himself as an unofficial tour guide. Maybe he had bad intentions, but then had a change of heart. I don't know. This wasn't really a scary encounter. It's actually a fun story that I recall fondly, but I never forget all the ways it could have turned out very, very badly. Whenever and wherever you go on vacation, be careful. We got lucky. I imagine that most people who pose as taxi drivers to trick unexpected tourists don't have such innocent intentions. Unofficial taxi man, you turned out to be pretty cool, but all the same, let's not meet again.
Number 2.
Creepy Volvo Stalker by C3Pioli. So this happened in the summer of 2016, when I was waiting for a friend to come over to my apartment. I didn't have a working cell phone, so I hadn't actually set up my buzzer yet. When people wanted to come over, I had to wait for them to message me so I could run down to let them into my building. This friend didn't have a cell phone either, so we had to do it the old-fashioned way, and we estimated how much time it would take for him to arrive, and I will wait outside and watch for his car. I don't remember the time exactly. I think he said he was going to show up around 4 p.m., but it was still really bright outside, as it was in the middle of the summer. Sorry if you were expecting a creepy middle of the night type of story. I know, bummer. I decided that I would go outside early, just to make sure I was there in case he overestimated how much time it would take for him to show up. I live in a large apartment building, 10 floors if I recall, with a second matching apartment that mirrored mine across the lot. I live on a busy street, with a little strip mall just down the road, and a Tim Hortons across from that. I'm thankful that I live in such a busy area. Had it been anywhere more discreet, I might not have had this opportunity to share my story. I don't know if I could do a good enough job describing the area, but here's a shitty picture I quickly drew on paint to give you a better idea. By the stop sign, there is a wall with angled ends pointed towards the building, and some bushes/trees between the wall and the road. The road that the Tim Hortons is on is the busy street I mentioned earlier, and the road that my building is on with the stop sign is a small street that turns into a dirt road, with lots of constructions behind the trees at the back of my parking lot. I apologize if none of that made sense, but what you need to take away from that is that the street is a quiet, dirt road, unused by regular commuters, and only used by construction vehicles. It was rare to ever see a regular car driving there. There was no need for anyone to use that road. So, I go outside and stand by the stop sign, and light up a smoke while I wait for my buddy. And a couple drags in, I notice a car coming around the corner behind the trees at the back of the lot. The car drove around the corner at normal speed, but began to slow down once he got closer to my building. Some red flags went up, but I shrugged it off as nothing, and told myself I was being absurd. It was the middle of the day, and the driver probably slowed down because he was looking for an address or something. By the time he was passing me, he was doing under 10 kilometers an hour, or roughly 6 miles per hour, and was staring me down. I made eye contact with the guy, and most people when caught staring at someone look down or look away embarrassed they were caught staring. Not this guy. He just looked me dead in the eyes and continued driving past. I was pretty uncomfortable with this, mainly because I was standing so close to the road, so as he drove past, we were able to get a good look at each other. If it weren't for him being inside a vehicle, he could have reached out and touched me. Now, because he was so close, I was able to get a good look at him, and this also gave me the creeps. His appearance sent up more red flags. If you ever seen Edram, he looked a lot like him. Also, he drove what I believe was a 1992 Volvo 960. It didn't exactly do him any favors either. The car kind of screamed, "I'm going to make a lampshade out of your skin." The reason I think I know the exact car he drove is because he passed enough times that I have the image of the Volvo symbol and the diagonal line across the grille of the car burned into my mind. After this happened, I spent several hours with my partner on Google Images trying to find the car that I thought he drove. At first I thought it was a Buick, but I digress. After he drove past me, he turned right and headed towards the Tim Hortons. Once he passed my building, he was out of sight, and I assumed that would be the last of him. A couple minutes later, I hear tires on gravel in the distance and see a vehicle heading my way behind the trees. And who do you think comes rolling around? Him. By now, I'm regretting my decision to come out and wait for my friend early, but I figured he would be showing up any minute now, and so there was no point in going inside. So, creepy guy is headed towards me again, and this time, he's driving even slower. When he passes me, I try not to make eye contact, but I can't help it. I feel his eyes on me, and I have to look. When I meet his gaze, he waves slowly like the Queen and speeds off, turning right again. I'm more creeped out at this point, but I'm still trying to play devil's advocate. I assume he just mistaken me for someone that he knows, and shrugged it off again. I light up another smoke, while I'm waiting to try to calm myself down, and here comes Creepo again around the corner. This time, I tell myself that if he doesn't either turn into the parking lot, stop and ask for directions, or turn left when he passes me, that he's either crazy or actually has some bad intentions. When he finally passes me, he's slowed down to under 5 kilometers an hour, or roughly 3 miles per hour, and he just smiles at me. His smile sent the biggest chill down my spine. In broad daylight, close to a busy road, next to a large apartment building packed full of people, it sent a chill down my spine. The rest of the red flags went up. Alarms started blaring, lights flashing. Everything in my body was screaming at me to get the fuck away from this guy. I moved a bit farther away from the road and the stop sign, so that if he were to try something, I'd be closer to my building and might have an easier time getting away. I also continued to tell myself that I was crazy and ignore my intuition. I figured he was a senile elderly person who may not be in their right mind, or he was really lost and a tad socially retarded. Either way, I told myself that there was no way he'd be coming around the corner for a 4th time. I was wrong. He came around the corner 2 or 3 more times after that too, each time staring me down with this overly creepy smile. Not once stopping to speak to me or make an attempt to pull over, always just doing a slow crawl by and staring me down. I waited for him to pass me once more, and when he was out of sight, I ran to the other side of the wall and hid behind the angle part and the trees. The wall was a tall concrete one, and the trees also held me hide me from the road, while I peeked around them to watch for the Volvo. This way, I figured when he came around the corner, he'd see that I was gone from the stop sign, and just move on with his day. I had enough time to see him coming, and moved behind the wall back to the stop sign as he passed, so he wouldn't see my new hiding place. What really creeps me out the most is that when he was passing by that time, he let his car slow down to the point of it barely moving. You know when you begin to take off your foot off the clutch, and your car starts rolling? Or how in automatic, the second you take off your foot off the brake, the car will start rolling forward really slowly. He slowed down to that point, and I watched him from where I hid as he looked around to see where I went. He didn't come back after, which only adds credits to the fact that whatever his reasons were for circling my building so many times had to do with me. I have no idea what his intentions were, but I was glad it was in the middle of the day and I was next to a busy street. So, item number 2. Let's not meet. P.S. I apologize if this was poorly written. It was 4:20 a.m. Excuse me while I hit the bong, and I was running on no sleep.
Number 3.
I'm not your peepee, dumb peeper. By Cressa Collier. I was 18 and had just moved out on my own. I started getting the feeling that someone was watching me, and late that night, I would hear shit outside my window. My apartment was on the ground floor, and it was backed up to the woods. I had deer and shit back there. Anyway, a month or so goes by, and one night, I look over to my window, and there's some motherfucker at my window. He looks shocked. He has the audacity to knock on my front door. So I get my gun, and my ankle biter dog is yipping away. I open the door, and he says, "Sorry, I thought you were somebody else," and leaves. Well, I call the cops. They come out there and catch this guy trying to break into someone else's apartment. Turns out the guy had been stalking a girl one building over and was coming to my apartment trying to catch a glimpse of her through the curtains. So, dumb peeper, let's not meet again.
Number 4.
Sleeper Creeper at My Golf Course Job. By Chemically Loved. I started working at my current summer/part-time job last spring. I am situated in an old large building that used to be a country club, but fell into disrepair about 10 years ago. Although there's nothing paranormal about my story, it is maybe worth mentioning that my former manager committed suicide in the main office upstairs when they went out of business. It adds to the unsettling quality of this place. Along with that, so do the seamlessly never-ending hallways and passages, innumerable hiding holes and half-empty pools, and other strange unused parts of the building, like a secret shower room/sauna, and a tunnel of storage areas that connect to the men's and women's bathrooms. There are a lot of doors to the outside in this place. It makes sense for a country club, but currently, we only use one small room for the golf course check-ins, the kitchen, and one dining room for the restaurant upstairs, and the small cafe area for early morning golfers to get their coffee and beer. The cafe area is where I work. In the summer, we clock in to open the cafe before 6 a.m., often before the sun comes up. The golf course people come in shortly after, but I will be the first person in the building every morning. I would unlock the front door, disarm the alarm, walk downstairs in the dark, unlock this cage that keeps the drunkies at the bar upstairs at night from wandering downstairs, and crawl along a long dark hallway with no windows to get to the light switch at the end of the hall. This always creeps me out, and I end up holding my keys between my fingers like brass knuckles. I am a woman in my mid-20s, and I lived in plenty of bad neighborhoods. A ninja sliding down the wall of the opposite side of whatever doorway is coming up, just because it's pitch black, and I'm a scaredy bear. By the time I get to the end of the hallway and flip the light on, My heart is pounding out of my chest as I struggle to find the right key to let me into the cafe. The whole situation started when Tim, a golf course employee, mentioned that he kept shutting the door between the men's locker room / bathroom and the storage area that leads to the women's bathroom, and every time he would go back in there, it would be open again. This, along with some strange noises, was fodder for the bar regulars upstairs to claim that this place was haunted by the old manager and whomever they say died within these walls. Travis, a co-worker in the cafe, also mentioned that a few minutes after he opened, he went into the men's locker room and noticed it was steamy and smelled like soap. So he went into the shower room to investigate, and everything was soapy wet and still hot. He was the only person that was supposed to be there at that time of day, but he didn't see anyone, so he let it go. A couple months later, Tim noticed this weird side door that you had to climb up a rickety old staircase on the side of the building, and it wasn't shutting correctly. He fixed it, and locked it correctly, and didn't think much of it. Shortly after, someone from the golf course came over to tell me that they found someone's entire life packed away in one of their hundreds of lockers that no one uses, and they thought someone was living in the storage room between the men's and women's bathrooms. He must have been coming in before the golf course people set the alarms when they left in the evenings, and leaving after the cafe person, i.e. me, would come in and turn off the alarm in the morning. So that means that every morning, as I blindly shuffled my way down that long dark hallway alone, one of those pitch black doorways actually did have something hiding behind it. A few days later, a red-faced angry bald man in Vietnam-era army-issued glasses came into the cafe and started screaming, puffing, and flailing his arms around, yelling about his stuff getting thrown out. He went over to berate the golf course people, so they asked him about the contents of the locker. His answers about the specific items led them to realize that this was the man who was secretly living in one of the building's many dark passageways. I never found out much about him, whether he was dangerous or just homeless, but watching him scream about his stuff made it clear that he wasn't 100% rational. I still work there and do a darkness shuffle down the hall every morning when I work. And although they say everything is on the up and up with the alarm system and the door locking, it still creeps me the hell out. There have been other creepy things that have happened in this place recently to make me think that this isn't all over with, which I will post separately if anyone is interested. The author of this story left some pictures that are going to be relevant to this update. They're going to be playing on screen shortly. Update. I just posted about my situation last summer with a creeper at my golf course job. I didn't want that post to be too long, so here's an update. On Monday, I noticed a pad of paper and a long pair of tweezers clipped underneath the stairs. I thought it probably had to do something with the inventory because right before, a manager came in to count our foodstuff and beverages. Also, it wasn't in an area that was easily accessed by customers, but technically not locked in any way during the day. Today, my friend who works at the bar upstairs told me that someone brought this pad to her, and it had some pretty schizophrenic thoughts in it. It had lots of stuff about how electric cars work to support some kind of government agency surrounding social media, and some plan to patent some sort of alternative energy source that involved the UN and some foreign passports. This part of the building is not under video surveillance, so I have no idea who left it there, and if they were planning to come back for it or not. But it could be the same guy from before. He seemed pretty unhinged, and definitely liked to spend a lot of time in the weird parts of this building.
Number 5.
Creepy Steve by Esme. This is my first time posting here, and I'm on my mobile, so I apologize for any spelling/grammatical errors. I've been reading these stories for hours, and I figured that I'd share my own creepy experience. When I was growing up, I would always have friends come over and we would play outside in my front yard. Cars would drive by maybe once an hour, so a lot of the time we would play in the street. I lived in a pretty nice neighborhood. It was quiet and consisted of 90% old people, so my mom was never worried about us being outside alone. But that changed eventually. It all started when I was 10. I had invited a few of my friends over to hang out. They were all into sports, so they decided we were going to kick around a soccer ball in the street, while I played with my cat. I was bored, so I started looking around, and I noticed my neighbor, I'll refer to him as CS, across the street sitting in his garage. This was normal to me though, because ever since I was little, he would sit out there in front of a small TV for most of the day. This time was different though. I started looking closer and realized that CS had binoculars up to his face. Strange, I thought. The only thing in front of his garage he could see is my house. No birds or animals that were interesting enough to watch. I turned to my friends and pointed it out, and they agreed it was strange, but we shrugged it off and continued to play. A little while later, I glanced into CS's garage again. This time, he had a camera pointing at me. I started freaking out. He then noticed us talking about him and he went inside. A few minutes later, we see that his front door is open and someone has a camera held up to the glass. We still continue to play in the road, freaked out a bit, but we didn't care to go inside. Eventually, he comes back outside, but this time, he comes out of the garage. He grabs a small bench from his porch and starts walking towards us. He sets the bench at the edge of his yard, a few feet away from us. Out of curiosity of what he was going to do next, we continued chatting and playing. Why didn't we run away? I don't know. He starts mumbling things, and my friends ignore him, but I can't help to listen closely. He starts saying things about our appearance. Through his mumbles I hear,
"So beautiful. Gorgeous."
But then I clearly heard him say,
"I wanna lick your pussy."
I was young, but I knew what that meant, and I was done being near that man. So I went inside and told my mom. She was obviously shocked and disgusted, so she went to do something about it. Coincidentally, the guy living next to the creep is a cop, so she goes out there and tells him the story. The cops show up to CS's house and talk to him and the lady that lives with him. The cops can't really do anything about it because they say that they have no proof that he actually did these things. The lady living at the house claims that he's a friend and she's letting him live with her. Also that she had no idea that he was like this and he was going to tell him to leave. We also found out that his name is Steve, hence the name Creepy Steve. So CS leaves that night. My family is relieved for a few days, but then he comes back. My mom was hesitant in letting me go outside after that. She would watch me and my friends through the window every time we were playing outside. He didn't do anything else for a while. One day, a few months later, my friends and I were laying in the front yard talking and looking at the stars. Then, CS opens his window. He's naked. He stands there for a few minutes as we freak out because our innocent eyes have never seen anything like that before. Then he closes his window. I didn't tell my mom about that incident. CS didn't do anything after that until about 7 years later. In July of last year, my friend and I arrived to my house around 10 p.m. after going on one of our summer driving adventures. She planned on staying the night, so she parked at the bottom of my yard. We sat in her car talking and laughing pretty loud about our lives, friends' drama, etc., with the windows down. What we didn't know is that CS has his windows open and could hear us. CS just recently started a thing where he liked to blast music so loud that the entire neighborhood could hear it. It was pretty annoying when you could hear music all the way inside your bedroom at night, but no one ever complained. Anyway, we started to hear music playing from his house. I remember thinking, what the hell does he listen to? This sounds like cheesy porno music. My friend is dying laughing because of how strange the music is. Then I start hearing moaning. Yep, I was right. It starts quiet, and you really had to listen to hear it. But he turned it up. Now porn is playing loud enough for every surrounding house to hear. My friend and I are crying of laughter, but at the same time terrified because we knew that he could hear us. So now we're sitting in her car hearing, "Yes, Daddy," and excessive gagging noises as we sit there in silence trying to comprehend what the fuck was going on. I started filming it and sending it to all my friends because that shit was pretty funny. But then it stops. After this, we see a figure walk across the room in front of the glass door. He's naked, again, and he knows that we can see him. He stands there for God knows how long. We started freaking out and don't know what to do next, so I text my dad to come outside and save us. No response. Eventually, I have her drive up to my garage to let me inside, and she speeds off. I tried to tell my parents again, but they didn't care since nothing was fixed last time. So later that night, at about 2 a.m., my friend who moved to another state decided to show up at my house. I sat outside with him and told him about the whole thing. At the time, his friend was in the back seat of his car eating Wendy's. Then at 2 a.m., CS and his lady friend leave out the front door to walk their dog around the neighborhood. They leave the front door open and unlocked. So, the Wendy's kid decided to run up, open the door, and throw his french fries all over their living room. Not exactly the revenge I wanted on CS, but it was pretty funny. Shortly after that, we moved away, and I haven't seen him since. So yeah, Creepy Steve, let's not meet.
Number 6.
Andy. Bye. They're out to get us. A few years ago, my brother-in-law bought another apartment complex in Florida. He owns a few apartment complexes in West Palm Beach, Miami, etc. So when he told me he bought another one and wanted me to manage it, I figured why the hell not? I had just graduated college with my degree and planned to get my master's. So I figured I'd manage his place and do graduate school. When he booked my flight to Orlando, I was stoked. Heck yes! I love Disney, and I dreamed about buying a year pass and checking out all the neat parks. Then when I got there, we drove out of Orlando, and I had a bad feeling. He bought the apartments in a town called Leesburg. It's only an hour or so from Orlando. It's if a biker community and a retirement community had a baby. I was a little disappointed that I was an hour away from Orlando with its nightlife, clubs, and whatnot. I made it work though, and soon settled into life, managing a small apartment complex. I had my own one-bedroom apartment in the corner, and then there was 10 other tenants. Most were older folk, snowbirds, and retirees that spent their days golfing and swimming in the pools we had. There was 2 military families, one with small kids. Then there was Andy. Andy was an enormous man. I'm a pretty big guy, 6'4", 250 pounds, but he was at least 6'6" and 400 plus pounds. He walked around with a cane and had long black hair that he put into a ponytail. He worked from home, or so he said, but rumor was that he was on disability after a horrible work accident. I really didn't care. He paid his rent on time, he was quiet, and he kept to himself. I was only in his place once, when his AC cut out, and to my surprise, he was pretty neat. No food containers or pizza boxes, beer cans, etc. that I expect a big guy like him to have laying out. Things in our complex were pretty good for the next year, until one night in November. It was raining, like it always does in Florida, and it was about midnight when someone rang my doorbell. I looked out and saw one of my tenants, Joseph. Joe was one of my retirees who had retired to Florida to, in his words, play golf and drink beer. Normally, he was all smiles and jokes, but that night his face was pale and he looked frightened. "I hate to bother you, Sam, but something ain't right with Andy." I put on my jacket and followed him to his apartment, since Andy was his neighbor. He put his finger on his lip and mentioned me to listen. I put my ear up to the door and heard Andy fighting with someone. It sounded like whoever he was fighting with was throwing things. I was taken aback, as he never had a guest over in the year he lived here. So I knocked. He stomped over to the door and opened it. He looked normal. He was very well dressed and put together. And like I said, he wasn't a messy guy, but he answered in his shirt that had grease stains. His hair was limp and greasy, and he smelled like body odor. I peered in behind him and saw that his place was a disaster. I asked if everything was okay. He was irritated and told me it was, and pretty much shut the door in my face. I sent Joe back into his place, told him to let me know if he heard anything else, and went to bed. The next morning, I decided to pay Andy a visit to see if he was okay, and so I went to his place and knocked. No answer. So I decided I would try again later. I got busy doing other things, and then I forgot all about it. December rolls around, and I start getting all the monthly rent checks, but none from Andy. This got me worried a bit, since he's always on time with his checks. So I knocked on his door. Nothing. I knocked again, and I heard grunting and moaning. Now, I should have called the police first, but I didn't. I opened the door with my keyring, and was hit with the foulest smell ever. It smelled like piss, shit, vomit, and body odor all rolled into one nasty smell. The walls were streaked with what I assumed was shit, and the place was trashed. I started calling for Andy while dialing 911. I hear moaning from the back bedroom. I can never unsee what I saw. To this day, I still get flashbacks. Andy was naked and was laying on the floor of his room on some dirty clothes. He was covered with his own shit and piss, and there was piles of vomit on the carpet. That was bad, but what was the clincher was that he was covered in bites. Human bites all over his arms, legs, and they were starting to smell of infection. He was also bleeding from his rectum. I wondered who attacked him. Was it the woman we heard him fighting with? I didn't get any answers until a few days later. He had been rushed to the hospital and was fighting for his life in the ICU. The doctors talked to his sister, who turned out to be his medical guardian, and things slowly came into place. Turns out that Andy did that to himself. He suffered from multiple mental disorders. He stopped taking his meds in the month before November. There was no other person. That night, he was arguing with himself. Those bite marks, he inflicted himself. The bleeding from his rectum was from inserting a foreign object in there, and doing so much damage, it ruptured his internal organs. He ended up pulling through, and went home to live with his sister. I had the task of cleaning his apartment, and what I found while cleaning his apartment pretty much freaks me out as much as finding him. He had a shoebox full of cutouts from magazines, old family photos, and even photos he obviously took of the residents of the apartments, including himself. All of the eyes were burned out with cigarettes, and on some of them, X's were put over their mouths. I'm not sure if this was part of his mental decline, or if he was always that creepy, and I never noticed it. All I know is that, Andy, let's not meet again.
Number 7.
Creepy Trio by Phoenix Vio. This happened last year, at the beginning of autumn of 2016. I'm a short Italian girl, not intimidating at all, also pretty friendly. I was 18 years old, and used to have long walks up the hills of my town. I usually wore gym clothes, had earphones in my ear, and a small backpack on my shoulders. The walk followed a simple course, up on a hill for a while, then back to the center of town, and back home. It was late afternoon, and I was walking down the hill quite fast, getting closer to a small building, about 200 meters far from the center. The building was a small house used for parties or different events, but also used as a calm place to stay in, since it was far from the main road. Right next to the building, there was a lovely playground with a few benches on its corner. I've always seen a group of people sitting there, chatting or just playing card games. There are 2 dirt roads you could choose from to go past the house. One on the right, near the playground, and one on the left, behind a building and a little flyover and between some trees. Since I didn't want to take the usual and most obvious right road, I decided to go left and take some pictures of the trees, very colorful during that season. I was half across when I felt the need to lower the volume of my earphones. Someone was trying to get my attention. "Hey, you!" I turned around and noticed a group of guys walking towards me. One of them was waving at me and telling me to come closer to them. Curious, and kind of worried at the same time, I stood still, holding the earphones in my hand. The guys approached me, smiling. They seemed pretty nice and friendly at first. "Hey, sweetie, how's it going? Having a walk?" We talked for a few minutes, small talk, and fake information coming from my side. After a bit, I tried to continue my walk after I said goodbye. I just didn't want to keep the conversation with him. "Would you like to have a drink with us? There's a party inside. You should join us." I turned around again. The same guy, tall, fit, dark short hair, and dark eyes, got closer to me, and his smile kind of got weird. I mean, it seemed just fake and quite creepy. I gotta go now. It's getting late for me," I said. He kept following me, insisting for me to join them. Then I realized the building was just empty, and there was no music playing at all. The windows were open, and no sound was coming out of there. I politely declined again, repeating to him that my walk took too much time, and I needed to go back home. "Your loss," he said, as he looked at me almost disappointed, and kind of pissed that I refused his nice offer. He went back to the other two guys, and I put my earphones back on. Not started the music again though, since I wanted to wait until they were gone, or at least far enough to make me feel 100% comfortable. As soon as they saw me put my earphones on, they started talking while I was walking away. Then I heard footsteps behind me. They had started following me. I didn't dare to turn around, so I walked quicker to keep a decent distance from them. I panicked though, after a minute or so. The volume was completely turned down, and I could hear every single thing they were saying. The leader of the trio seemed to give the others orders of some sort, and while I tried to focus on his words, the adrenaline was released in my body as soon as I heard him saying, "Get her." I was scared now. The only thing I thought of doing was running, so I sprinted as fast as I could, trying to reach the main road in time. Heavy and quick footsteps behind me confirmed that I didn't overhear their chat. I reached the little wall next to the road. I climbed it to lose them. It worked. They stopped chasing me. Maybe they thought it wasn't worth it. I was able to reach the main road, panting and shaking. I didn't know why they wanted me to follow them. Now that I think about it, I was lucky and smart enough not to immediately turn my music back up. They would have probably grabbed me and dragged me inside the house. I never warned the police about the event, and I think I should have done something, but as soon as I got home, I just wanted to forget and go back to my normal life. Just put all behind me. 1 week later after the event, the memory came back up while I was talking to a guy friend who usually goes to the playground and meets some of his friends. John, my friend, was a little taller than me, but muscular and way more intimidating than me. As soon as I told him about my experience, he got mad for what happened and promised me that he would take care of those guys if they ever showed up again. I avoided that place till a few days ago. I never seen them around that place again.
Number 8.
Giant Man in the Bushes by Egg Wallet. This story happened on a summer night in Australia when I was about 15. A quick bit of backstory. A guy I went to school with was a complete dick to my best friend Jake, and sometimes me. He was pretty sneaky about it, and never got into trouble, and we could never prove anything. So eventually, we got fed up, and thought of a way to get back at him without getting into much trouble. We decided to stockpile as many dead toads as we could find. They are an introduced species here, and a huge pest. In my dad's freezer, and then sneak up to his house and throw them at his house at night. Then in the morning, he is going to wake up with dead, rotting toads all over the place. Really stupid and immature, I know. So one night, we decide that we have enough ammo. We get everything ready and ride up to his house, which is in a really hilly, annoying part of our suburb, but because of the hills, it makes it for an easy getaway on our bikes, so we persevere. We got to his house around 11:30 p.m. and sneak up and start to scatter all the dead toads all over the place. But right as we're about to leave, Jake decides to throw a frozen toad at the house, and it went straight through the window with a loud smash. We jumped onto our bikes and we took off, flying down the windy roads in the dark. Eventually, we got to a section of the road where we had to make a shortcut through some trees and bushes leading to a bike track where people walk their dogs and ride their bikes. It's about 30 meters of fairly thick bush and trees from the main road with a 2-lane highway on the other side. It's pretty secluded, so we felt safe. We were sitting there on our bikes on top of a small hill leading down into the highway underpass, chatting and laughing in the dark, feeling pretty happy with ourselves. There were no lights, just the moonlight and the occasional car headlights on the highway beside us. We started talking about what we should do for the rest of the night, when I could have sworn I heard something moving in the bushes about 15 meters away from us. As soon as we stop talking and listen, it stops moving, so we think nothing of it and keep chatting. But eventually, I hear it again. Jake doesn't believe me and is calling me a pussy and laughing, but I can still hear it, and I'm visibly starting to freak out, which then freaks Jake out. We are sitting there in the dark on our bikes looking into the darkness when a huge fucking man just stands up from the bushes wearing nothing but some black tracksuit pants. This guy was huge. Had to be around 7 feet and 120 kilograms. He had a thick mustache and long black hair and just started sprinting at us like nothing I have ever seen in my life. We took off pedaling as fast as we could towards the underpass, and I could hear this guy's footsteps directly behind me. I don't know if it was the fear getting to me and I was just hallucinating or something, but I could have sworn I could feel his hands swiping at my back. His footsteps sounded easily close enough to grab me, so maybe he did almost get a hold of me. Luckily, my friend and I have been riding BMX for years, because at the bottom of the hill, you can either go through some metal barriers to stop motorbikes from riding on the path, and then immediately turn left into a tunnel under the highway, or get through the barriers and go up another hill. This massive human is still right behind me, growling and swearing at me as we go down this hill with Jake just ahead of me. We get through the metal barriers and he turns left to go under the highway without saying a word, so I grit my teeth, go straight, and power up the hill as fast as I can. I'm almost in tears, praying to anyone or anything that will listen, when I realize I don't hear him behind me anymore. I look down the hill towards the tunnel, and I see him just standing there, staring at me. I will never forget it. We both stare at each other for a few seconds, and all of a sudden, he just sprints off into the tunnel. I was so scared, because I had no idea where my friend was, or if this guy had caught him, since this all happened before every person had a mobile phone, and I had no way to contact my friend. I rode as fast as I could to the service station, where I thought he would end up since the tunnel under the highway kinda leads that way, and sure enough, he was. We were shaking and freaking out, trying to figure out who the fuck that guy was, because we both knew the guy who we were getting revenge on, and what his dad looked like, and it was nothing like that monster of a man who had just chased us in the dark. Still, to this day, I have no idea who that dude was, and I have never seen him ever again, but I'm so fucking glad he never caught either of us. I still wonder what would have happened if he had caught us.
Number 9.
Man Hiding in the Trees by Big Play JJ. It's been 11 days since my first post, and you guys gave me some good tips and seemed to like it. So I've decided to share another experience with you guys. Hopefully this will be the last time I have to post in this category. For some background, this happened back in 2003 when I was 6 years old. I am from Michigan, and this experience takes place over the summer. In the area I live in, we have a community pool that everyone who lives in the community is welcome to use. A special event this pool throws is called a midnight swim. The whole point of this is that on that day, the pool is open until 12 a.m. The pool usually closes at 9 p.m. on Monday through Thursday and Sunday, and at 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. The midnight swims were held on Friday nights. There, 3 midnight swims were held each summer, and as a kid, it is an event my brother, also 6 at the time of this story, and I always looked forward to. Before you think I had bad parents for letting 2 6-year-olds stay out swimming until midnight, my brother and I were both excellent swimmers, since we had learned how to swim at 3 years old. And for being out till 12 a.m., we lived in a safe neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened. On this particular day, we had to wait until 9 p.m. before we could go to the pool because my parents had to work late, and our sitter didn't want to leave our house to take us to the pool. So, 9 o'clock rolls around, and my brother and I are ready to go. My parents get home and get ready themselves. As my parents are getting ready, me being my 6-year-old self gets bored and decides to wait for them on the front porch. A little layout to my neighborhood. There is a main road just to the left of my house. Anyways, I am walking around on my front lawn when I hear a voice call out to me saying, "Hey kid, come over here." At first, I thought this voice was coming from inside my head. Don't judge me, I was 6 years old. But after hearing this voice call out a few more times, and looking around, I spot a man standing in the shadows of some trees. My parents taught me not to talk to strangers, but I was standing in front of my house, and thought I would be safe. I asked the man what he wanted, and he said that he wanted to show me something. Realizing that there was something strange with how the man hadn't come out of the shadows, I told the man no, and I was going back inside. The man did not like this one bit. He scolded me for not listening to my elders, and to do as he said. At this point, I was shocked. I did not expect this man to yell at me, but because of stupidity, I decided not to go inside, and to just stay on my porch. I told this man that I did not know him, to which he replied that he was a friend of my parents, and they wouldn't mind me going over to talk to him. It was at this point that my dad had walked outside, and asked me who I was talking to, but by the time I pointed to the trees, the man was gone. So, man who tried to lure 6-year-old me into the shadows, let's not meet ever again.
Number 10.
He Knew I Was 11 by Second Silence. Preface: I went through puberty a lot younger than most kids did, starting when I was 8. So by the time I was 11, I looked a lot older than 11. I have had some creepy encounters due to this, but those won't be mentioned here. Edit: this was when I lived with my mom. My dad had nothing to do with this, and I live with him now. My mother had a very different approach of me growing up than most parents probably did. She had decided that I needed to dress up to attract the attentions of men to date. I have nothing against people wearing revealing clothes if so they wish, but this wasn't something that I really wanted to do. She was always trying to set me up with men, even ones that were considerably older than myself. Where she grew up, it wasn't uncommon for a young teen to date someone who was over 18, even if the law said it wasn't okay. By young teen, I mean 12 to 14 years old. It was after Halloween, and I had dressed up as Abby from NCIS. I had an affinity for that show growing up. And my mom had my dad take pictures of me posing in a graveyard. The pictures made me feel rather uncomfortable because they had me in vaguely suggestive poses while wearing a low-cut dress. My mother then proceeded to post these pictures to her Facebook. Soon thereafter, she had one of her friends message her and ask for her sister's phone number, which was me, because he thought I was much older than 11. My mother told him my age. He seemed shocked and tried to set up his 17-year-old son to date with me because he thought that we would hit it off. My mother agreed to this, seeing it was a good opportunity to match me up. The thing is, the 17-year-old knew that I was 11. My mom told him this, and he didn't care. He said that I was hot either way, and it didn't really matter because he wasn't technically an adult yet. So it's not illegal, right? My mom scheduled a date with him, one where he would be coming through town. At the time, I didn't know that she gave him my phone number. I had one so I could contact my mom or dad, since I walked home from school, and some other personal information about me. I begged her to please cancel the date because I didn't feel comfortable. She said that I was being unreasonable and that I should be excited for this. She told me that he would pick me up from the house and that we were going to have a picnic up on this one hill. It used to be a church, but it was closed, so people use it as a makeout mountain. I was not comfortable going on a date with him, especially since neither my mom nor his dad would be there. As the date rolled around, I got a text from an unknown number, which turned out to be his phone. He told me that the plans had changed, and he was going to pick me up on my way home from school, and then we would go to the hill. I was freaking out. Like I mentioned, I didn't know that my mom had given this pretty much stranger my phone number, nor that he knew what school I went to. Though in retrospect, I suppose it wouldn't have been that hard to find out, since I walked. I never did actually go on a date with him, luckily. I feigned sick a few days before, and ended up missing a good chunk of the school week. Turns out I didn't need to anyway, because him and his dad ended up having to take another job farther away, so he wouldn't have been able to go out with me anyway. I think, besides the phone bit and the school bit, the creepiest part is that the 17-year-old, who was almost 18, was okay with going out with a child.
Number 11.
Family Home Invasion by Miss Key 204. First post. I'm not the greatest at telling stories, so please bear with me. I'm not sure if this belongs here, since it wasn't exactly creepy, but extremely scary. When I was 14, I met a guy named James. He was 17. I dated him for 5 years. I am 30 now. I grew up very poor to a teenage mother. I never met my father till I was around 20 years old. I made some pretty bad choices as a young lady. James was a drug dealer. At the time, I found that thrilling and so cool. It was a typical abusive relationship. He cheated on me a lot, would physically, mentally, and emotionally abuse me. He then would buy me things or give me money to make it all better. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't know any better and had poor self-esteem. His money took me away from my poor home life, so I stayed for 5 years. This happened when I was 17. James and his brother Victor bought a house in a really nice neighborhood. Victor was a single guy, the player type. He had a random girl over visiting that night. James and I were going to bed. It was about midnight. Victor and his new girl left the house and took James's vehicle. James and I were alone in the house. About 2 minutes after Victor left, we heard a knock on the door. James gets up and says he must have forgotten his keys. I'm in bed. I hear James say, "You have the wrong house. You need to fuck off." He comes running into the room, telling me to close the door. As we hear the door getting kicked down, 2 men entered the house. One was wearing a bandana over his face. The other guy, I didn't recognize. He wasn't trying to hide his identity. They started kicking down the bedroom door as we did our best to hold our weight against it. We were screaming and begging them to leave. At one point, the bandana guy got his arm and his leg through the door. I made eye contact with him. He dropped his sawed-off shotgun. I reached for it, and he seemed to back off a little bit. The other guy grabbed the gun. Out of fear, I couldn't recognize him, but I felt something in his stare he gave me. We thought they were after drugs and money. We had no weapons. The money and drugs were in a separate bedroom. They didn't take anything. It wasn't a robbery. They were there to give someone a beating. James was on the phone with the police the whole time this is happening. The guys took off. It was time to check what they took and hide the drugs. The police came. We noticed a bullet in the wall in the bedroom directly beside the room we were in. I found out later it was cause bandana guy hit the gun out of the other guy's hand as he tried to shoot me through the door. I went home the next day, completely traumatized, not wanting to tell my family anything that happened. They all gossip. I walked in the door, and my grandmother knew about the home invasion. My family knew James was a drug dealer. They weren't concerned. I thought at some time, someone who James knew must have known someone in the family, since she said a female cousin told her. My cousin, Anthony's wife, called me saying, "Anthony wants to say sorry, but you weren't supposed to be there." Again, I was dumb and assumed someone in the thug world told them. We lived in a small city. I was so naive and was convinced that it was a robbery from a rival drug dealer. That wasn't the case at all. We spent weeks waiting for them to come back. James made sure he always had a few scary guys with guns in the house. I realize now that that only added to my trauma. A few months after this happens, I was at James's house reading the newspaper. I see my cousin Anthony and another guy in the most wanted section. The other guy looks vaguely familiar. Anthony is gang related. We're the same age and grew up extremely close. Although he got locked up at age 13 and has been on and off ever since, Anthony and I would write to each other. We had a strong bond. The phone rings. It's a girl named Carly that is completely in love with Victor, but since he's a player, he treats her like crap. She brings up the mugshots in the paper and says, "That's your cousin, right?" She confesses to me that the home invasion was because of her. The other guy in the mugshot liked her. She told me how Victor would slap her around and forced her to get an abortion. My cousin Anthony was his friend. They made her tell them where Victor lived, and they watched the house until they seen what they thought was me and James leaving. She was apologizing profusely, begging me not to tell James. I didn't. I knew if I told him, he would have her shot. Also, because it was my cousin, I assumed I would get some of the blame or have to show James's thugs where my cousin lived. Regardless of what he did, I'm stupidly loyal to family. I seen Anthony at a family function a few years later. He said sorry and that he loves me and that it wasn't his fault. That was 13 years ago. My life is completely different now. I am an upstanding member of society, but I still feel a lump in my throat when I talk about it. I can't go to a gun range without having an all-out panic attack.
Number 12.
My pit bull is my hero by Clowny Critter. My husband began working overnight shifts a few months ago, so this means my dog and I usually watch TV and sleep all night before he gets home. Sometimes I'll just draw all night while the dog sleeps at my feet, and when the weather is decent, I'll take her out for a jog, or I'll just take her over to my friend's house so we don't die of boredom. One night, while I was drawing some fan art for my favorite band, I decided to put my drawing pad down and go for a walk to get myself a soda and maybe a pack of peanut butter crackers for the dog. I got the dog ready and made sure my cat wasn't hiding around the door so she wouldn't dart outside, and we left soon after I located the cat snoozing on our couch. I remember this happening around late summer because our town likes to prepare for Halloween 2 months in advance. Pumpkins started to appear everywhere, and my dog likes to try and stop to steal tiny pumpkins from cute displays that local mom and pop stores put up. I can't count how many times I would have to apologize for my dog's rude behavior, but that's not what the story is about. Sorry, I'm just rambling and remembering the funny things my dog does. While jogging carelessly and dragging my 70-pound pit bull mix from her beloved pumpkin displays, a man across the street starts yelling something I couldn't make out at the time. Of course, I turned around and asked him what he said. We had a short and uneasy conversation that went something like this. The man said, "Yeah? What are you doing out here? It's kinda late." I replied, "Just taking the dog out for a walk." "Why?" It was around 9:30 p.m. The man then said, "Isn't the old man supposed to do that?" I responded, wondering if I even knew this asshole. He'll be back from work when I get home." The man finally said, "Oh really? Does he always let you take the dog out this late?" After the man said that, he started moving across the street quickly and wouldn't break eye contact with me. I started backing away like I was ready to run, but my 70-pound blue pit bull mix started growling and snarling. Somehow my dog knew that shit wasn't right at all. The man snapped out of his bullshit and looked down to see my dog flashing her pearly white teeth. My dog lowered her head and stared this idiot in his eyes. The man tried to laugh it off and took one more step forward. This sent my dog into a fucking rage My dog lunged and barked like she was going to rip his head off. I thank God I had a grip on her leash. Otherwise, this man may have been doggy kibble. The man finally got the hint and turned back. He said something else I couldn't make out as he left. I don't know what he would have done, but I was happy that my dog was with me that night. I just wanted to add that my dog has always been a very friendly dog, and she has never tried to attack anyone before or after this incident. Again, I am just so glad that she was there to save my ass from some idiot that night. So, creepy guy that's overly concerned about women walking their dogs at night. Let's agree to never meet again. Or maybe my dog might take a good bite of your ass next time. Hey guys, Psychotic Maniac here. I hope you guys enjoyed the stories in this video, especially that last one. That creepy asshole underestimated that pumpkin-loving pit bull. I want to apologize for not uploading anything in the past month and a half. My schedule at work changed dramatically, and I had to work from 4 PM to 12 AM every day for the past 2 months or so. My sleep schedule went to shit. Now my schedule seems to have returned to normal. Let's hope it stays that way. I felt really bad for not uploading anything for the past month or so. That's why I hustled and put together this 12th story video for you guys. Also, please excuse my voice sounding like shit. My allergy said, fuck you, and went and did CrossFit for allergies, or whatever allergies do to get you to look and sound like shit. Again, sorry for my absence. I promise I will never leave you guys again. If you guys like this video, destroy the shit out of that like button, like my allergies did to me. If you haven't subscribed, what are you doing with your life? Hurry your ass up and join the Psycho Squad already. Before I forget, I would like to give a shout out to Mist YT for their response to the last Finish the Sentence. Their creepy sentence was, "The man jolted awake to find dark shadows chanting around him while he hears the screams of his family." This video's Finish the Sentence is, "I look back up to the mirror to find." Go on and finish that sentence. I would love to read the creepy and creative things you guys have to say. I will be back with a new video very soon. Till then, be safe, and remember, everyone is a tad bit insane.